Well, welcome to this video, and I hope you like it. If you do, click the like button, hit subscribe, and share with a friend. Okay, I want to talk a little bit today about just the scientific method and a little bit about two controversial theories, evolution and climate change, and hopefully clearing up what the scientific method definition of a hypothesis and a theory are. It helps clear up some of this stuff. Generally, there are three things in science. Things are considered a hypothesis, a theory, or a law. Rarely is anything considered a law anymore, just because we always seem to find an exception to the rule. So, you know, in modern science, things tend to be kept to just being defined as a theory. Within a theory, some theories are considered proven or unproven, which is somewhat a matter of opinion where the dividing line would be between the two. But to start with, a hypothesis is an educated guess. It's a swag, scientific wild-ass guess. Something is observed. It's a thought exercise, just coming up with a reason. And in the scientific method, the purpose of a hypothesis is just to give you a starting point to try to figure out what is exactly going on. It's an explanation that doesn't really have anything to back it up. It's meant to be something that's reasonable. You know, you're not going to try to prove that the moon is really made out of green cheese, you know, some wild thing like that. But a hypothesis is just, you know, throwing ideas against the wall to see what seems to make sense. And when you find one that seems to make sense, like I said, it's just a thought exercise. You find an explanation that seems to make sense, then hopefully you can try to get some sort of data points to prove or disprove it. That's the next step. Sometimes things just, there's no way of testing them. Our knowledge is limited to our senses. You know, if we can't see it, hear it, smell it, taste it, touch it, or find some sort of a way to amplify our senses, such as, you know, using a microscope or using some sort of electronics to pick up, you know, radio waves that are beyond our, you know, what we can see with our eyes, or hear, or sound waves that we can hear with our ears. We can pick it up with, you know, technological devices that can take something that's out of our range of sight or hearing and, you know, show it to us in some format that we can see and or hear. Like I said, a good example is a microscope. You can't see, you know, microscopic stuff. You know, you can't see germs, but you can use the lenses in a microscope to be able to see things that are too small for your eye to actually see directly. So, but moving on to a theory. A theory is also a concept or an explanation of something, but a theory has some sort of evidence to back it up. And depending on the amount of evidence you have, it can be considered generally as proven or not proven. Because reality is like a puzzle with, an astronomical number of pieces, and we don't have the box top to look at, but you can put some pieces together and kind of figure out that, these dozen pieces here, there's a couple more pieces missing, but, you can tell that they make up a car. Or, these 24 pieces over here, they kind of fit together. They got a couple gaps in them, but you can kind of see that they make a tree. Now, depending on how many pieces you have, you might be doing a better or worse job of seeing what the actual chunk of the puzzle is. And I'm talking about the overall puzzle being, just the reality around us. Everything. So, evolution is pretty much considered proven. Still a couple pieces of the puzzle missing, but we've got enough pieces that we're sure of what we're looking at. We might be wrong on a couple of details where those pieces are missing, but we know what it is. We could put that together. Now, people in various religions will all say that they have the box top that shows them what reality really is supposed to look like, whether they have the pieces or not. But, every religion has a different box top, and they're all saying that they're the truth, and they don't really have any, they don't necessarily have any kind of facts to back them up, other than things that they themselves declare as facts pointing to their little picture. I don't think that science necessarily confirms or denies the existence of a God, but a lot of the backlash against evolution is basically saying it's some sort of an attempt to disprove the Bible. Well, the Bible itself actually has 2 stories of creation. If it's meant to be correct, as written, was man created on the 7th day after everything else, or did God create the Garden of Eden, put man in it, and then start creating everything else to see which one made Adam happy, and then eventually took one of Adam's ribs and made Eve? Which one is it? The 2 are mutually exclusive, and yet some fundamentalists will try to tell you that they are both correct down to the letter. I don't claim to be a Christian. However, I was raised Catholic. The Catholic Church accepts evolution at this point in time, and basically, being that there is a conflict there anyway, basically states that story is meant to be a parable to teach us something. It's not meant to be literal. So, and like I said, creation really isn't saying who started creation, or what do I say, evolution. Evolution isn't really saying that a God did or didn't exist. It isn't really saying anything about how everything all started, although scientists are trying to trace it back and find pieces of evidence the best they can. But, the beginning of time is not something we can directly observe because we are past it. We can put little pieces of the puzzle together to build a little bit better picture of it, but there's always going to be a couple of pieces missing. And, whether you believe that some of those missing pieces are God or nothing, or just don't exist at all, or aren't even relevant, that's a matter of personal opinion, because you can't really prove or disprove one way or the other. Evolution itself, however, is pretty much a proven theory. It's basically the same way that humans breed animals. You want a dog or a cow or whatever to be larger, you selectively breed the larger ones. You want it to be smaller, you selectively breed the smaller ones. You want it to have longer hair, you selectively breed the shaggier ones. You want a dog to have a longer nose, you selectively breed the ones with the longer nose, and the nose gets longer. And, you know, also shorter. You can look at dog breeds and see this huge variety, and, you know, they're all the same animal. And, you know, all that evolution is saying is basically over eons and eons of time, just the natural world has been doing that same selection to things, and that's how things eventually, you know, turn into something else. They just gradually change over time. And sometimes things get, you know, a population of something gets divided into two populations, and one population goes one direction and the other population develops a different direction. So you end up with, you know, going back to the dog or cow analogy, you know, the cows on one side in the valley on one side of a mountain get bigger, and the ones on the other side of the mountain get smaller because, you know, the big ones have an advantage in one valley and the small ones have an advantage in the other valley. You know, and it could be that one's, you know, has more food or less food, or different predators, or, you know, just different food sources. You know, one favors tall ones that can eat leaves off of trees, and the other one favors short ones that are closer to the ground and can hide under things. It's, you know, that's all it is just adaptation to your environment over time. And although you can't really see it with a lot of your larger animals, and except in instances where, you know, humans have been doing selective breeding, especially of domestic animals, you know, explain MRSA. You know, there are microbes out there that have become resistant to antibiotics. They adapted to a change, a human-made change in the environment, but they changed. You know, these things happen over time, and eventually things drift apart enough they become separate species. That's just the way it works. And going to climate change, you know, this is another one that's a hot button topic, like, and especially it seems the same conservatives that want to stick with creationism also seem to think that, you know, humans can't alter the environment. I mean, fly somewhere in an airplane and look down and see how much we've changed the world. The impact we've had on this world is huge. To say that humans, you know, don't have an impact, or there's no way they could impact something on that large of a scale is just wrong. It doesn't take much looking at the world around you to understand that. You know, we do have some forested areas still in this world, but they're the minority. It used to all be forest. We've changed most of the world. We've you know, dammed rivers, leveled forests, leveled mountains for all that matters, done all kinds of crazy things. You know, we've made salt lakes where there was nothing but desert. We've made, you know, we've irrigated dry land and grown crops in Southern California, and at the same time, you know, dried up a place where we took the water from. And so many environmental things that we have changed on a large scale. You know, it's kind of weird to think that we wouldn't have an impact. And while there is some natural variation, we've got pretty good evidence on how things vary naturally, and why things vary naturally, and at what pace things vary naturally. And the temperature is changing pretty much faster than the normal cycle by like tenfold. Or, what would be considered a rapid change in the environment in the past is, would have been spanning, 10 times what the change of the temperature of a degree, either Fahrenheit or Celsius, because it's a ratio, but, what would have been considered an abrupt change if it happened over 100 years, we're having happen over 5 or 10. It's a much faster change. And humans are a big part of that impact. And 98% of, all science personnel that are in fields anywhere related to it, from, meteorologists to astronomers to, physicists and, various environmental science fields, everybody agrees on it. It was pretty much not argued, almost 100 years ago when they were first thinking about it. They weren't really seeing the effects, but they were already saying, there is the greenhouse gas effect, and as we're making these greenhouse gases, it will have an effect. They didn't know how much, but, it was in science books that were written, in the 40s and 50s. So, and nobody was objecting to it then. It's not until roughly the Reagan era where this became a thing, where people were denying that it was even a fact, that it was possible. And, you can always find a talking head to say whatever position you want, but like I said, the consensus is that it is real and it is primarily caused by human activity. And, they've been able to extract a lot of the data from, the fossil record. They've been able to extract things from ice cores. There's a lot of data backing this up, and a lot of little facts, little puzzle pieces putting together this picture. And while there isn't a total agreement about the details, you have to separate the fact that, like I said, 98% of scientists believe, 100% in the concept. It's just the details. How much of the change in the environment is natural? How much of it is caused by humans? Everybody agrees that the majority of it's caused by humans right now, but people disagree on the impact of various parts of the puzzle. How important is each puzzle piece, and how much is it contributing, and basically how much can we predict the future? I mean, everybody predicts that the temperature is going to keep on going up, but nobody really knows how much it's going to go up or how fast it's going to go up. They plug in information and they make a mathematical model, basically saying, okay, based on what's happened in the past with the past levels of, carbon dioxide and how much ice cover there was at the Greenland ice sheet, and how much at the South Pole, etc. And, the temperature went up over the next year this much. And, then they'll go through all these little parameters kind of marking where everything's at the next year. And then they try to predict out, where are we headed in 5 years if we continue at this rate? And then obviously things like the pandemic changed the amount of pollution we're putting out and will impact global warming to some extent. But, each year in the future, you're making predictions of how much of the various greenhouse gases will be produced, how much the ice caps will shrink, and how much, because the ice caps reflect heat, being white, and the thawed territory being darker absorbs a little bit more heat. There's also a thing called a heat island effect with cities. And just human development in general. All these big paved areas and buildings and that, they hold heat. They hold the sun's heat more than, forest or prairie or something would. So that has an impact. And while you can say, well, this is a snapshot of this year, and this is a snapshot of the next year, and this is a snapshot of the next year, and you can track how much things changed, and you know that all these things have an effect. How much of the change from the first year to the second year was because of how much the ice caps melted? How much of it was due to increased, development? How much of it was from carbon dioxide? How much of it was from methane? And, those are the type of details they're arguing over. It's fine-tuning the details. And even the statistics on, how much carbon was produced and how much CO2, how much methane. There's a lot of debate over that because there's a lot of variation in the measurements. You can measure the air quality here and you can measure the air quality somewhere else, but you can't really simultaneously measure the air quality in all parts of the world at once. So, there's slight differences in the data. I mean, you can see going up and you can see going down, and you can make estimates of the total quality, but these estimates are always going to have a margin of error. That margin of error might be small, but that small margin might be, significant in predicting the future and dialing in what's going on. So hopefully that helps clear it up a little bit. And like I said, I wanted to definitely clear up, what is a hypothesis and what is a theory, and kind of, what is a proven compared to an unproven theory. An unproven theory is one that, the general consensus is there's not enough puzzle pieces to have a real good idea of the overall picture, proving the concept or whatever. And then there's, a proven theory. We're pretty sure it is. It's like we're pretty sure this group of puzzle pieces is a car. We don't have the outside rear view mirror. We don't have the license plate. We don't have the radio antenna, but we got enough pieces. We know for sure that's a car. That's kind of where we're at with evolution and climate change. On the other hand, there are some theories out there where, you got 5 puzzle pieces and you're like, is that a tree trunk? Is that a stone pillar? I don't know yet. It's, it kind of looks like a log. Might be an alligator. You might be surprised, and depending on how many puzzle pieces you have, and there's there are things at both ends that there's going to be a consensus among scientists as far as whether it's considered proven or unproven. But, there's a gray area in the middle where, ask 10 scientists and, you're going to have a couple that fall on each side about what their opinion is. So hopefully that clears that up a little bit. Hopefully that gives a little bit more insight into the, evolution and climate change, and why, even though it's, quote unquote, a theory, it is, considered factual as an overall concept. It's just the details that are considered debatable. Part of the reason why they don't call things laws so much anymore is because, you had Newton's laws of gravity, which they work, but they always had a couple of little weird exceptions to them, which Einstein's theories kind of solve. So Einstein supersedes these laws that, they stood for a long time and were considered concrete. So that's why we tend to stay away from calling things a hard, fast law anymore. You know, and once again, you know, facts are individual pieces. You know, it's like you do an experiment, and you do experiment A, you get result B. And you know, no matter who does that experiment or where they do the experiment, if the experiment is done correctly, they're going to get the same result. That particular cause and effect is considered a fact. But the overall concept, that's something that would fall into hypothesis or theory. It's usually more of an overarching explanation. You know, facts are things that, you know, they're very concrete, but it's the interpretation of what that fact means. And, you know, it takes several facts usually strung together to create a good theory. So, at any rate, I hope that clears things up a little bit. I hope it makes a little bit of sense. And see you on the next one. Well, I hope you found that video informative. Hopefully it made you think, and please click the like button and subscribe if you haven't done that already, and check out the video that should be appearing somewhere around me here, and I hope to see you on the next one. Thanks.